After America's Civil War, itinerant songsters and traveling minstrel show troupes spread their music far and wide. Early forms of music that would become the blues began to develop not only on the plantations, where former slaves and their descendants now toiled as sharecroppers, but also in towns and cities along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers and elsewhere. The music makers' repertoire variously included jump-ups, unrelated lines sung over simple chorded accompaniments, ditties, old plantation melodies, breakdowns, up-tempo dance pieces, church songs, bad man or folk hero ballads, and derogatory coon songs sung in minstrel shows by blackface performers, as well as popular white music, show tunes, and in some areas, as black musicians acquired formal training, classical works. The Jubilee singing of black spirituals ensembles drew national and international attention, and the ragtime craze that swept the country from the 1890s to the First World War established America's fascination with the circular music of African Americans. The blues drew from many sources to give voice to an African American identity. The lyrics often expressed a desire to move on to a better place or a better mate. Songs of lost love and mistreatment sometimes had a double meaning, as codified protest or contemporary, secretly directed towards the white boss man and his social order. Risque sexual double entendres also abounded, as blues inherited the vulgar side of ragtime's early notoriety as low-class and disruptive, denounced by churchgoers as the devil's music. It may have been born of sorrow and hardship, consigned to the margins of society, yet blues sought not to wallow in pain and misery, but to raise the spirits in a cathartic release, often with humor or irony, to get rid of the blues by singing them. The blues took hold in Mississippi, Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, Missouri, and the Carolinas, and several other southern states. Waves of northward migration would have eventually established Chicago as the blues capital, but in earlier years, St. Louis and Memphis were more significant urban blues centers. The cotton plantation system of the Mississippi Delta spawned an especially concentrated and prolific blues subculture, as workers sought weekend release from their toils and house parties, juke joints, country suppers, fish fries, and picnics, or in the nearest town's cafes, saloons, barrel houses, nightclubs, and brothels. A primary function of the blues was as dance music, played by banjoists, mandolists, and guitarists, string bands with fiddles, harmonica blowers, and washboard, fife and drum, pianists, and jet bands. Most blues performers also worked as field hands or laborers, but some made a living from their music, playing for workers on plantations or in levee and lumber camps. In towns and cities, black musicians were also able to join brass bands, mandolin clubs, singing quartets, and dance orchestras. While most such recollections, including those of bluesmen such as Big Bill Brownzy from Mississippi and Leadbelly from Northwest Louisiana, were published decades after the fact, a few researchers did file more timely reports of early blues or blues-like songs. Charles Peabody, a Harvard archaeologist working on an excavation in the Stovall Plantation in the Mississippi Delta in 1901, wrote of the autochromagnous music he had heard the black workers singing. Folklorist Howard Odom collected a number of blues songs in Georgia and Mississippi from both local musicians and traveling performers between 1905 and 1908, as well as some from North Carolina. Besides this, songs dating back to 1890 were collected by Gates Thomas in Texas. Various compositions published in the 1890s and early 1900s contained some structural or lyrical resemblance to the blues, although the blues form had yet to congeal. I Got the Blues by the New Orleans violinist Antonio Maggio, the 1908 instrumental that was perhaps the earliest such number to use blues in the title, was advertised as an up-to-date rag. Few recordings of black performers were made in the earliest eras of cylinders, piano rolls, and the 78 RPM disc. Of those that were made, most were spirituals, coon songs, or comedy routines. The primary dissemination of black music was still done via sheet music, including ballads sold on the street by itinerant songwriters, and public performances. Blues had yet to make a name for itself and was, in fact, only just beginning to be called blues. Some early blues men remembered the songs being called reels or reels. But a folk blues repertoire was forming, although it had not yet been being recorded, for songs such as Make Me a Pallet on the Floor, Joe Turner Blues, East St. Louis, Stack a Lee, and John Henry, along with other Southern airs noted by W.C. Handy, whose own blues compositions would also become jazz standards.